After nearly a full day of uneasy silence, the calm shattered just after sunrise. Around 7 a.m. local time, a new wave of Iranian attacks struck central Israel, reigniting fears that had only briefly subsided overnight. The strikes, described by officials as part of a coordinated barrage, hit multiple sites across the region, underscoring the unpredictable rhythm of a war that continues to escalate. In one of the most severe incidents, a missile carrying submunitions detonated over populated areas, dispersing fragments across neighborhoods east of Tel Aviv. The impact left homes damaged, buildings partially destroyed, and civilians scrambling for safety. Emergency services rushed to the scene, reporting multiple injuries and widespread destruction. Scenes from the affected areas revealed shattered windows, collapsed walls, and families evacuating under the watch of rescue crews. According to local reports, at least 100 residents were forced to leave their homes as authorities worked to secure the area and assess structural damage. The use of cluster-style munitions in the attack has drawn particular concern. Such weapons, which scatter smaller explosive devices over a wide area, have been used in previous phases of the conflict, causing casualties even after the initial explosion due to unexploded remnants. Beyond the visible destruction, the psychological impact of the attacks is becoming increasingly evident. Medical teams and specialized units have been deployed not only to treat physical injuries, but also to address widespread trauma among civilians. One official involved in the emergency response described the situation in stark terms. We're still conducting search operations. The statement reflected both the urgency of the rescue effort and the uncertainty surrounding the full scale of the damage. In addition to those physically injured, many residents reported panic attacks and acute stress reactions triggered by the sudden return of air raid sirens and explosions. Mental health units have been mobilized across affected regions, focusing on evacuation support and trauma counseling. This dual-layered response highlights how modern warfare increasingly affects civilian populations far beyond immediate casualties. The morning strikes were only one part of a broader coordinated campaign unfolding across Israel. Sirens echoed across much of the country as intelligence reports indicated simultaneous threats from multiple directions. Missiles and drones were launched not only from Iran, but also from allied groups across the region. Hezbollah forces in Lebanon intensified their rocket attacks on northern Israel, while drones and projectiles targeted strategic and civilian areas. In southern Israel, another threat emerged. A missile launched by Yemen's Houthi movement, aligned with Iran, was intercepted before causing damage, according to Israeli military sources. The interception underscored both the expanding geographical scope of the conflict and the effectiveness of Israel's air defense systems. Experts estimate that dozens of rockets and drones have been launched toward Israel within a single 24-hour period, illustrating the sustained pressure being applied from multiple fronts. This strategy, often described as asymmetric warfare, aims to stretch Israel's defenses and create continuous disruption. The ongoing conflict is no longer confined to a bilateral confrontation. Instead, it has evolved into a regional crisis involving multiple actors, each contributing to the escalation. Iran's leadership, now under Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei, following the reported death of his predecessor earlier in the war, has signaled continued support for allied militant groups across the Middle East. These alliances have allowed Iran to maintain pressure on Israel despite significant military losses. Analysts note that this decentralized strategy makes it difficult for Israel and its allies to fully neutralize the threat. Meanwhile, attacks have extended beyond Israel, affecting infrastructure and shipping routes across the Gulf. The Strait of Hormuz, a critical global energy corridor, has become a focal point of tension, with disruptions raising concerns about global economic fallout. Amid the ongoing violence, political leaders are shaping narratives about the war's progress and potential outcome. On the eve of Passover, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu delivered a speech aimed at reinforcing public confidence and framing the conflict as a strategic success. In his address, Netanyahu emphasized what he described as significant achievements in weakening Iran's capabilities and reducing the threat to Israel. We have broken the power of Iran's terror squads that surrounded us in a choke ring, he said. He continued, it's true they still have a limited capacity to threaten us, but they can no longer threaten our existence. The speech aligned with broader claims from Israeli leadership that the joint campaign with the United States has significantly degraded Iran's military infrastructure. Netanyahu also framed the conflict in symbolic terms, comparing Israel's actions to a modern-day exodus, invoking historical and religious imagery to strengthen national unity. Despite these claims, the narrative of success is far from universally accepted. Critics argue that the continued missile attacks and ongoing casualties suggest that the threat has not been fully neutralized. One political rival sharply criticized Netanyahu's speech, saying, "You almost changed the Middle East." The remark captured a growing sentiment among opponents who believe the government's portrayal of victory may be premature. While Israel has inflicted significant damage on Iranian infrastructure and leadership, the persistence of attacks raises questions about the long-term effectiveness of the strategy. Adding another layer of complexity, the United States has begun signaling a possible shift in its approach. President Donald Trump has indicated that the war could end within weeks, suggesting a desire to avoid prolonged military involvement. This potential de-escalation comes amid growing economic and political pressures, including rising energy prices and strained alliances with European partners. However, Iran has rejected claims that it is seeking a ceasefire, calling such assertions false and baseless. The disconnect between public statements from Washington and Tehran highlights the uncertainty surrounding the conflict's trajectory. On the ground, the reality for civilians remains starkly different from the strategic narratives presented by political leaders. Each new wave of attacks reinforces a sense of vulnerability, particularly in areas frequently targeted by missiles and drones. In towns east of Tel Aviv, families are navigating the aftermath of destruction while preparing for the possibility of further strikes. The timing of the attacks, coinciding with a major religious holiday, has added to the emotional strain as communities attempt to maintain normalcy amid uncertainty. The continued displacement of residents, combined with the psychological toll of repeated sirens and explosions, underscores the human cost of the conflict. The broader picture suggests a conflict that is far from resolved. While Israel and its allies have achieved significant military objectives, Iran's ability to sustain attacks through regional networks remains intact. Experts caution that even a formal end to hostilities may not bring lasting stability. The decentralized nature of the conflict means that violence could persist in different forms, driven by proxy groups and ongoing geopolitical tensions. At the same time, global implications continue to grow. Disruptions to energy supplies, shifting alliances, and rising economic pressures are turning the conflict into a broader international crisis. For Netanyahu, the stakes are particularly high. Domestically, his political future may depend on how the war is perceived by the public. While he has managed to maintain his coalition government for now, analysts suggest that continued casualties or an inconclusive end to the conflict could weaken his position. The challenge lies in balancing claims of success with the realities on the ground. If the war ends without a decisive outcome, critics may argue that the objectives set at the outset have not been fully achieved. As the conflict enters another critical phase, the situation remains highly volatile. The early morning strikes have demonstrated that even brief periods of calm can quickly give way to renewed violence. The combination of military escalation, political messaging, and global implications creates a complex and uncertain landscape. While leaders speak of progress and potential endings, the reality for those living under the threat of attack tells a different story. The coming days will be crucial in determining whether the conflict moves toward de-escalation or enters an even more dangerous stage, one that could reshape the region for years to come.